The final conversation between Jon Snow and Sansa Stark is not merely a farewell between siblings, but a quiet battlefield where loyalty, identity, and political necessity collide. Beneath the surface of their words lies a deep psychological tension that had been building ever since Jon bent the knee to Daenerys. Sansa, shaped by trauma and hard-earned wisdom, no longer trusts easily, while Jon, driven by honor, cannot perceive deception in the same way. This fundamental difference sets the stage for a conflict that feels both inevitable and tragic. Sansa's perspective is rooted in survival. Having endured manipulation, betrayal, and cruelty, she has developed a heightened sensitivity to power dynamics. To her, Jon's allegiance to Daenerys is not just a political move. It is a dangerous surrender of autonomy. Her skepticism is not born out of malice, but out of pattern recognition. She has seen powerful figures promise protection before, only to demand submission in return. In her eyes, Jon is repeating a cycle she barely escaped. Jon, on the other hand, operates from a moral framework that values unity and sacrifice over suspicion. His trust in Daenerys stems from shared struggle and mutual respect forged in battle. Psychologically, Jon seeks cohesion, believing that collective strength is the only path forward. This places him in direct opposition to Sansa, who has learned that unity without boundaries often leads to subjugation. Their disagreement is not about facts, but about fundamentally different interpretations of safety. What makes their exchange so compelling is the unspoken emotional weight. Sansa's challenge to Jon is layered with both genuine concern and a subtle assertion of her own authority. She is no longer the passive girl he once knew. She has become a strategist, capable of questioning even those she loves. Jon, meanwhile, struggles to reconcile this new version of Sansa with his memory of her, creating a cognitive dissonance that weakens his ability to respond effectively. Trust becomes the central currency in their interaction, and it is already depleted. Sansa does not trust Daenerys, and by extension, she questions Jon's judgment. Jon trusts both women, but fails to recognize that trust is not transferable. This imbalance creates a psychological stalemate, where neither can fully convince the other without compromising their own identity. The tragedy lies in the fact that both are right within their own frameworks. Their conversation also reflects a deeper theme of identity transformation. Jon, having discovered his true heritage, is caught between roles: leader, brother, rightful heir. Sansa, in contrast, has consolidated her identity through hardship, emerging with clarity about her priorities. This asymmetry gives Sansa a psychological edge. She knows who she is, while Jon is still negotiating his place in the world. There is also an undercurrent of power negotiation. Sansa's questioning is not just emotional, it is strategic. By challenging Jon, she is testing the limits of his authority and subtly redefining the balance of power between them. Jon, unwilling to assert dominance over his sister, inadvertently concedes ground. This dynamic reinforces Sansa's position while further destabilizing Jon's. The inevitability of their conflict stems from these layered tensions. It is not a sudden rupture, but the culmination of diverging paths. Every experience that shaped Sansa pushed her toward caution and control, while Jon's journey reinforced ideals of honor and unity. When these trajectories intersect, conflict is unavoidable because neither can abandon the principles that define them. Emotionally, their interaction is marked by restraint. There is no explosive argument, no overt hostility, only a quiet, persistent friction. This restraint makes the moment more powerful, as it reflects the reality of deeply rooted disagreements between people who still care for each other. The silence between their words carries as much meaning as the dialogue itself. In the end, their conversation is less about resolving conflict and more about revealing it. It exposes the psychological divide that will influence their future actions and decisions. The tragedy is not that they disagree, but that their experiences have made agreement impossible without self-betrayal. What remains is a fragile bond, strained by the weight of power and the cost of trust. From the very beginning, the relationship between Jon Snow and Sansa Stark was shaped by difference, and their final exchange serves as the culmination of a long-standing psychological divergence. What appears to be a disagreement about leadership is, in reality, the manifestation of incompatible worldviews, forged through distinct forms of suffering. Their conflict was not created in that moment. It was always embedded in who they were becoming. Sansa's psychological evolution is defined by control regained. After years of being powerless, she has learned to anticipate threats and assert influence before it is taken from her. This creates a mindset where trust must be earned continuously, never given freely. In her interaction with Jon, this manifests as a refusal to accept his decisions without scrutiny, especially when those decisions involve external authority. Jon's trajectory, by contrast, is defined by sacrifice and responsibility. He consistently places the needs of the many above his own, often at great personal cost. This fosters a belief that leadership requires trust and cooperation, even when it involves risk. Psychologically, Jon is predisposed to see alliances as necessary, while Sansa views them as potential vulnerabilities. The tension between them is amplified by their differing relationships with power. Sansa seeks to control it, to ensure it cannot harm her again. Jon, however, often rejects power, viewing it as a burden rather than a tool. This creates a paradox. Sansa believes Jon is too willing to give power away, while Jon believes Sansa is too focused on holding it. Neither perspective is inherently wrong, but they are fundamentally incompatible. Their final conversation reveals how deeply these beliefs are ingrained. Sansa's insistence on questioning Daenerys is not just about political caution. It is an assertion of her right to evaluate and judge. Jon's defense of Daenerys, meanwhile, is an extension of his commitment to loyalty and honor. Each is acting in accordance with their psychological conditioning, making compromise unlikely. There is also a subtle element of projection in their interaction. Sansa projects her past experiences onto Daenerys, interpreting her through the lens of previous tyrants. Jon projects his ideals onto Daenerys, seeing her as the leader he hopes she can be. These projections prevent both from seeing the situation objectively, reinforcing their opposing stances. The inevitability of their conflict is further reinforced by their emotional investments. Sansa's primary loyalty is to the North and its independence, while Jon's loyalty is divided between his family, his people, and his sense of duty to a larger cause. This division creates internal conflict for Jon, but clarity for Sansa. In psychological terms, Sansa operates with a singular priority, while Jon navigates multiple competing ones. Communication breakdown plays a crucial role in their dynamic. Jon's tendency to simplify and reassure clashes with Sansa's need for detailed understanding and strategic planning. When Jon says, "Trust me," Sansa hears a dismissal of her concerns. When Sansa questions him, Jon hears doubt in his integrity. This misalignment ensures that even honest dialogue leads to further misunderstanding. Their interaction also highlights the role of fear, though expressed differently. Sansa's fear is of losing autonomy and falling under another oppressive rule. Jon's fear is of division leading to destruction. Both fears are valid, yet they drive them in opposite directions. This divergence transforms fear into a force that separates rather than unites them. Ultimately, their final exchange is a moment of quiet recognition. Neither explicitly acknowledges it, but there is an underlying awareness that they are no longer aligned. The bond they share is real, but it is no longer sufficient to bridge the gap between their perspectives. This realization adds a layer of melancholy to their interaction, as it marks the end of a certain kind of unity. In this sense, their conflict was always destined, not because of fate in a mystical sense, but because of the psychological paths they walked. Each decision, each trauma, each lesson learned pushed them toward this moment. Their final conversation is not the cause of their divide. It is the revelation of it, a quiet confirmation that trust, once fractured by experience, cannot be fully restored without transformation neither is willing to undergo.